you're being locked down. You're in a big box. Some are bigger than others. And we're talking about being moved from a big box to a smaller box, and then sometimes to even smaller boxes. That by itself may not be so bad. Even though some of those places are so small, you couldn't keep a domestic animal in them. It would violate the rules of the SPCA. And men and women are being kept. Women not as much, but they're certainly being kept in there. You're denied visits. Now I'm speaking with a broad brush because there are caveats. Some more. You're denied visits. You're denied any congregate activities at all. It's a tiny cell. You may or may not have TV, but more often than not, you won't. You may not even have a radio. You have no access to the outdoors for recreation, or the most limited under the most trying conditions. But it's the absence of socialization, and the only person you see or have any interaction with is likely to be an employee. There's a lot of talking up and back, That's why solitary it's not so solitary, but it's deep end isolation is really what it is. That's why I prefer that. And it takes over, and some people can survive it, many people can't, and many people just fall apart. And in the old days, those of you who've studied criminology, corrections, the early penitentiary movement in this country, the Eastern Penitentiary in Philly, those guys were locked down. I mean, they were all, the belief was, they came into some of these penitentiaries, they put a hood on them, they went into a cell, they didn't come out unless they were dead or crazy or released. But when a person was put into isolation in the 18th century, very often it was some sort of a roomy cell, and they were allowed to do work in their cell. But it was in the belief that the reason a person became a criminal is because they couldn't deal with the disorderly, capitalistic, industrial society. We're going to put them into solitude. This is the deepest form of solitude. There was a rationale for it. There is no rationale for what we do now. The only rationale is management. It's easier to manage these guys. And correctional officers love to work those units, no matter what they tell you. They never have to meet. You don't have to mix. You don't have to talk to them. And when an officer leaves off working in a seg unit and goes into general population and has to walk around inmates, they are really unsettled by it. So it's a safe place in many ways. And it's your problem case, you're gone. So the one way that we're bringing, this case that I'm working on in Arizona now as a monitor, we've got some. The whole prison system has 5 years, we've done 1 year already, to racially and ethnically integrate under a court order, a settlement. And I'm working with another guy who's a social scientist on this. But what we're doing, and it wasn't our idea, instead of punishing people if they refuse to integrate, they're getting amenities if they do integrate. They're getting barbecues and TV, and they're getting more visits, and they can wear their own clothing. The greater level of amenity in a prison, the less need there is for any form of discipline like this. You just don't need it. People don't want to lose their barbecue or their extended visit or what have you. And so the tighter the prison, the tougher the prison is, the more likely you are to get the use of segregation, because the line between compliance and violation is right here. What do I have to lose? How bad can it be? It's already a horrible place, so it's a little more horrible. But if a person has some amenity and you still can maintain control, I think that works. At least we're finding we've completed 1/5 of this integration project. Nobody's been hurt. The Mexican mafia is saying you integrate, you're not getting up in the morning, and they're getting up in the morning because they would rather run a risk. Those threats are out there. They'd rather run that risk and have a barbecue and longer visits and a big TV to watch sports than face even this. So the longer solution here has to be changing the prison culture, you know. All right. I'm not ending, I'm just stopping because my throat's on. How about some observations or questions, or let me explain to try to clarify something? I think I threw enough out there to kind of disorganize, but so be it. Yes, yeah,
you mentioned women, so are they less prominent in solitary confinement, or what's the condition?
You know, I have the data somewhere, but it's not in my head. They don't use solitary confinement as much with women. Some of it can be nasty. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen 18 months, you know, really, you know. But it's not used as often. And I think it's because women are different kinds of management issues. You know, there's no violent sex in women's prisons. You know, there is sex, but it's a matter of establishing supportive relationships. Guys are killing each other, you know. So I think it's a different problem, and so it's less. I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with, you know, gender differences or anything. It's just the way in which the prison culture establishes itself. Women establish a support network right away, and you come into somebody else's care, custody, and protection, and it's not a threat, but it seems to work. So the women that I have met, and I can't say that I don't know if this is representative, who've been in solitary, have been seriously mentally ill, and they were put in there because of the acting out of their mental illness. And if prison is bad for someone who's mentally ill, can you imagine what it's like to be locked down 23 hours a day, never get out, never see the sun, never see the sky? Yeah. I think it's torture. You know, and when I asked for the lead lawyer, who's a senior partner in the Chicago law firm, I said, can't you talk to the judge and get these? And I kept hounding him, and he finally said, you're intemperate. I thought I was saving the world. He thought he was intemperate. He called me intemperate. He had a lot more money than I did. But you know, well, whatever. Let's see. Am I missing? You shouldn't be afraid. You might think, because I know I jumped all around. I mean, even if you have a question that you think is really kind of silly or basic, it probably isn't. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Which one of those appealed to you, basic or?
I think it was Latin law that did a study on social interaction, and we based it off of recent Schaefer's intimacy process model. And it was about how without social interaction, that there was empirical evidence that it was bad for your well-being, both physically. People without that suffered tremendous physical ailments as well as mentally.
Yeah.
And that study was based on a lot of studies and cited by a lot of studies. So with that kind of empirical evidence, isn't it proof that it's a violation of the Eighth Amendment, and what can be done about that?
Well, it's that kind of empirical evidence that's being used, that's being brought in, and it gets challenged. It's not a broad enough study. It's not, but that's exactly the kind of evidence that is being used. Let me back up for a minute and try to be. The cases that have been won now are won around a group of people that I call vulnerables, just for juveniles, particularly vulnerable to the lack of socialization. And now that we have that new evidence about how the human developmental model for juveniles, I mean, it's clear that with the plasticity of their minds at that time, it's almost invariably an impairment. So those cases have been won. Not at the Supreme Court level, but won in a lot of different courts. And then the mentally ill, they have been won. So the case that should be brought, and it was brought, a case called Ashker in California. They settled it. And it said, it asked this question, is it a violation of the Eighth Amendment to place any inmate into extended penal isolation? Word to that. So that means we're not saying they're particularly vulnerable, you know? See, when you win a case like that, if you can show like the vulnerable cases, you go into court, you don't have to prove that you are individually going to be hurt. You just have to prove you're a member of the class. I have a diagnosis of seriously mentally ill. I'm a juvenile. Now we're saying that the damage is so broad-based, stuff like and the proof is so evident. And Justice Kennedy has indicated, you know, there are 2 or 3 justices that have indicated indirectly that they would sign off on a well-brought case. I think we're there, almost there. And there are some people. So I don't know if that's a good answer to you, but that's the kind of evidence. Some of the studies are suspect. And I'm not a social psychiatrist. Comes up with a Gilligan. He studies 6 people, and comes out with broad generalizations about, you know, it won't work. I'm not saying don't do it. I mean, but it's not going to work. And the higher you go up the federal court level, from district court to court of appeal or Supreme Court, the more demanding the proof is. It's a big step to say these are categorical exemptions from a certain form of punishment. You can't impose the death penalty on juveniles, for example. That's a categorical exemption. You don't have to say, I'm especially vulnerable. I'm a juvenile. You can't execute someone who's sufficiently mentally retarded or developmentally disabled. The argument isn't over the rule now. It's do you fit the developmentally disabled category? So those are categorical exemptions. And my point is that it just should be a punishment that should be taken off the table. And you know, there's some movement. There's an association of state correctional administrators who have taken a position, at least to modify it. And that means a little more due process reviews.